Hello and welcome to Beyond the Things Written. Today I thought I'd take some time finally to do my testimony and my experience of getting out of Jehovah's Witnesses and my experience of living, being born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I want to keep this as a kind of a brief introductory testimony, partly too because, as we'll discuss very shortly, my experience through Jehovah's Witnesses harmed me greatly. Going through therapy and having to relive my life to really start and learning about human psychology and the human mind and how we're raised and how we grow and all those things have given me a new perspective on my upbringing. So I haven't processed it all. I'm still in the midst of all that stuff. Then we can deal a little bit more into the details of being raised as a Jehovah's Witness. My mother is German and my father is Hungarian. My mother married very young and married someone a lot older. Came to Canada, not speaking any English. She arrived in Montreal, French-speaking part of Canada, which, of course, she'd spent time in Belgium as well, so she knew French. Even though she didn't like the French in Quebec, I guess it made it a little easier. I'm one of 7 brothers and sisters. One died. Grew up very poor in the government housing in Toronto, different places, violence, and it was normal to us. I had prostitutes as neighbors. It didn't seem out of the ordinary when you're born in it. It's like being born in Jehovah's Witnesses. You don't realize how cuckoo that is. Life as a Jehovah's Witness, just as an overall for me, was fear, guilt, anxiety, worry, never being good enough, depression, suicidal, a very harmful, abusive experience that I'm only begun to start to understand and to put into words. As a Jehovah's Witness, when you grow up, you are living in a different world. When one wakes up, and for me, it's like a spell, you are joining the human race. If you are not a Jehovah's Witness, and haven't been raised as a Jehovah's Witness, you really cannot get. You just won't. Understanding the culture, understanding that this is day after day after day, year, decade after decade. And as a Jehovah's Witness, you live with the end always in view, a good Jehovah's Witness. And I lived with 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. And as a young Jehovah's Witness, you are aware of that right off the bat. To start off with, my biological father was abusive, and so I suffered from child trauma right from an early age, and so had to go through a religious organization that does not believe in mental health in terms of being able to be helpful. Everybody is of the devil. There are 3 components. 666 is big business, big politics, and big religion, and they're all used by the devil to mislead them. When I came on the scene, my mother was being duped into the 1975 doctrine. And of course, as we'll get in later, I never bonded with my mother and any of those things. Life is different. The no birthdays and no Christmas and no Easter and not having friends and not really friends. We had to be careful, right? If you had a friend, you didn't call him friend, you call him an acquaintance. You didn't go to parties, you went to gatherings, You played semantic games. Life is routine. If you're a good Jehovah's Witness, again, not all Jehovah's Witnesses are created equal. Some are on the fringe, but, if you're a good Jehovah's Witness, every day is filled with some activity. You are either studying, going to a meeting, preparing for the meeting, going to the meeting, and you just do this routine, or you are believing that any moment the end of the world is going to come. School is very difficult again for Jehovah's Witnesses. We don't believe in patriotic ceremonies. So for the entire time in my Jehovah's Witness world, I had to leave for the national anthem. So Canada is a little different than other places. I know in America, I think you guys have your Pledge of Allegiance. We have the actual national anthem played. So every morning, I either sat down, stayed seated, or I would leave the classroom. Every single day, I dreaded it. I dreaded it. Did it. I did it. Never failed. In fact, I recall one time, I was about 8 or 9, like grade 3, 4, or whatever you are in that age. And we had an assembly in the gymnasium, sometimes they have these things. And they decided to play the national anthem. Okay, and everyone stands up, and I'm sitting there as I can't stand for the national anthem. And of course, the teacher comes and doesn't know me, because it's in the gymnasium, there's all the teachers there, and he's trying to physically pull me up, and I'm just, it was dreadful for me to think that I was going to be disobedient to Jehovah by this patriotic ceremony. In 3 months, I'll be dead if I did this. I cannot compromise. Jehovah's Witnesses are always told about not compromising and integrity and persecution, and you're going to be persecuted. I was terrified in my life. Terrified. I was scared of demons. I was absolutely mortified of demons well into my 20s. And to this day, I sleep with lights on somewhere. It really messed me up, that whole demon thing. And I was just, there were a whole bunch of other things. I had medical issues, and I thought I was going to have heart surgery and all this stuff. That's what life is as a Jehovah's Witness. It's just this routine, and just completely scared all the time. Something happens in the news, something bad happens in the news, it's the end of the world, right? Anything can be a time. And it's the culture. So it doesn't mean if it's the actual interpretation of the Bible, it's the culture that is, oh my God, something bad happened. The stock market crashed. Oh, that means the end of the world. Oh, the stock market went up. That means it's the end of the world. Anything becomes the end of the world, good or bad. Oh, there's war, it's the end of the world. Oh, there's peace, it's the end of the world. And everything's the end of the world. And you're supposed to dedicate as much time as possible, because of your love for God, in getting people to join this religious group. And so, as a Jehovah's Witness, when you're raised, you're very cognizant of these things. You're very cognizant of being different. You're very cognizant of the end of the world. You're scared. They used to tell us on the platform, and I bet you they don't do this anymore, and if you say you're going to discipline your children, you better do it. They would say that repeatedly. Now, maybe it wasn't out of the magazine, but they created the culture. And they would repeatedly, because I remember sitting there scared to death, a little 6, 7-year-old kid, that you're going to get it. Just as it was a slipper. Terrible slipper. I know that slipper. Got imprints from it. And there were plenty of times, you know it, because it was 6 kids. 6 kids from 4 to 14 or whatever it was, We're going to act up once in a while. And, wouldn't you hear it? Oh, about the kids, when you would hear them getting dragged to the back of the house screaming. And you'd just be going, oh, goodness, thank goodness not me today. But I remember even other people would discipline your children. And I know that because my brother was one of them, taken down, getting disciplined by other people in the congregation. Almost every church you go to has a place for 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. Not Jehovah's Witnesses. No. You're to instruct them while they're in the belly. While they're in the belly. Start reading Bible passages to them. That's when you're a baby, you get to go back. But you go back and you sit down and you sit. And I didn't get coloring books. Some people got coloring books. I didn't get Bible story book. Some kids got Bibles. I didn't get it. I got this. I play with this. Play with that. I play with this thing. The little pop thing. Those pop off the top there. Pop off this. Anytime I had amazing imagination because it was going everywhere. Thank goodness for Star Wars, because I had a lot of Star Wars things to think about. Kids are kids, Nope. This is good for you too. You take it. You take that spiritual meat of all those anti-types. You need to know that Naomi doesn't mean Naomi. It means they're faithful remnant since 1919. You need to know that as a 5-year-old, don't you? And on that goes. And sleeping even was not good. Some kids could get away with sleeping. I got away with sleeping occasionally. That was always nice to get away with that. But a lot of times I would not get it. Depends on your parents felt that day. Oh, I could sleep this time. Oh, next time, no sleeping this time. And here's the kicker: you gotta like it. You gotta like it. You gotta like going to the meetings. You gotta like going out in service. You gotta like doing personal study. You gotta like it. Don't like it, you gotta pretend that you like it. And if you don't pretend you like it, you're gonna feel guilty because you're pretending that you're liking it. What 5-year-old kid likes this type of stuff? And yes, 5 years old, younger. I was doing this since my first memory. And my mother, when I got about that age, married a Bethelite. She got remarried, divorced my biological father, and remarried. This Bethelite was a special pioneer. From the time he was 18, he was an elder at 23. He was called into Canada Bethel, knows David's Plain, knows a lot of the big uppers, especially in Canada branch, Eugene Rossum, and he knew them, worked with them, would visit them, grew up with them when I was a kid. Obviously, they're all there at the wedding and such. But he married my mom. And, of course, now so that we have a presiding overseer is what they call him at the time. And we are now in Watchtower routine to the max. My mother becomes a pioneer. We're all still school age at this time. Conflicts at home, constantly, with the older brothers that didn't get baptized on fringe ready because my mom was getting into it. They never really got into it, especially my oldest brother. So there was constant tension. It was a miserable place to grow up in. And I never got close to anyone in my family, never. And I know there's other factors. It's not just because of Jehovah's Witnesses, but definitively this religion made all those things worse by a factor of 10 or more. It was a tell on each other. We didn't know when parents were complaining about one thing in one room and one in another room, and you didn't even know what was going on. This heavy aura to everything, saying a cuss word, things of that nature, normal things that the kids get in trouble for that relatively minor are taken as just gigantic, universally important things. Father figures now coming in, very into this movement. And we believed it. What child doesn't believe what's being told to them? So a couple events I do want to point out and say my first time from 1 to 10. One was a time my mother needed a blood transfusion. So I was about 8 or 9, and I recall, this was a year after my brother died. So he had been born, he died the next day. And his name was Daniel. And I remember we were having family study. My mother went to the washroom, came back down. I can see blood coming down her leg. And she was in the middle of a miscarriage. Which, of course, you don't know what that is when you're a child. You don't know those words. You never heard of such a thing. So off to the hospital they go, and she spends days there. I don't remember all the details. We didn't talk about it much after either. But her blood count got very, very low, and I know she was in danger of dying. And they wanted to give her a blood transfusion. And why I wanted to share you this story, though, as a child, 8 or 9, pacing upstairs, little tiny house we lived in. Same place I paced when my little brother died. And now I'm pacing again, the same place barely a year later. And my mother could die for not taking a blood transfusion. And you know what I was worried about? That they were going to give her one. Not that she was going to die. Why would I? We got 3 months. 3 months. My mom was going to be back. World's going to be over. Paradise would be here. But if they give, she'll be dead forever. Folks, that's an 8, 9-year-old child. I'm glad I still remember that so I could share what it does to children, how it distorts the natural family bond. So life, of course, is full of conventions. I do remember Freddie France, seeing him a couple of times. Once at Montreal Convention, 1985 it was, the big Olympic Stadium, 78, 79,000. I remember seeing him then. That's kind of a big deal. Freddie France was, it's not a big deal, but in Jehovah's Witness world, people know who Freddie France is. He was the institutor of the blood doctrine, although Gene Smalley had a lot to do with that as well later on in the 80s. There was a seminal moment, I would say, one of the, probably the most seminal moment, I might say, in my entire life. I was at the congregation, I still remember, the one downtown Toronto University. And this experience happened to me. It changed my life. It changed my life forever. Like, to this moment, and I'll talk about a few of these moments, defined my life and who I am to this day. And it still, like, resonates as one of the most important aspects of my life. So I was sitting there, daydreaming as you did. And it was a school talk. Probably was the number 4 talk. Back in those days, what they called the school, and people would do parts. You'd read Bible reading, and the girls would do a talk, and then there'd be a number 4 talk. The reason why I'm telling you that is because he was able to speak a little extemporaneously. And he said the word Sermon on the Mount. Sermon? We don't use words like sermon, except when we say Sermon on the Mount, because it becomes colloquial to Matthew 5-7. So, but it perked my ears up at the time. What are you talking about, sermon? So I started paying attention, right? Like, oh, what's this about? And I started to read it. Now, before I get into it, I had to set up how, already at this age, what became apparent to me, even if you don't discuss it, you know it on a certain level, you see. The number one motivator for Jehovah's Witnesses is to escape. Now, I can't say this for everybody. Obviously, I can't say that. But I could say probably in a general way. The number one motivation is the Armageddon is so close. And in order to survive, this is the formula given to you by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. They know how to survive it. They've been appointed in 1919 as the only Christian group to be receiving direction from God. But yet everyone talks about how they love Jehovah so much. My love for Jehovah has caused me to auxiliary pioneer this much. My love for Jehovah has caused me to become a regular pioneer. My love for Jehovah has caused me to skip the Bethel service. My love for Jehovah, you know how it is. It's always the love for Jehovah that's causing you to do all these things. It's not the fact that this is the only way to get out of this town when it goes to hell in a few weeks. And I knew that as a child. I knew that. We're not doing this just because we all love God so much. Because that's not what the conversations were about. He's a little guy. I knew that. You guys are worried about the end of the world. You guys are worried about, so am I. I'm terrified to death every single day. We're all conforming our lives through our education, our work, and what we do with every moment of our time because we are convinced the end is coming. But it's because you love Jehovah so much that you're here at the meeting. And it's because you love Jehovah so much you're at the book study. We had them back then. And it's because you love Jehovah so much, on and on and on and on it goes. So even as a little boy that was sitting with me, although I wasn't articulating it to anyone in any way, as I began to read Matthew, I'm not going to go through it, the Sermon on the Mount, I just had this really transformative moment where as I read it, I began to get such clarity. I began to feel like I was the only one there. Because there was so hyper-focused on him. My heart was beating. I was like, I get this, I get this, I get this. And I was reading the Sermon on the Mount. You must not hate someone. You know, that makes you a murderer. You must not, I'm like, yeah, oh, wait. You must not lust after a woman. And it's like, oh, I get it. God doesn't want us to do these things because, they're difficult or hard. It's because it should be in our heart. He's telling us things that should be there already. And that we are supposed to do our service to God, like we say, because of our love for Him. Even though what you see is because you're scared of Him. But that moment, it was a pursuit of motivation. Why you're doing something is more important than what you're doing. Why you're doing it is more important than what you're doing. Now, even though at that time, I don't think I appreciated or understood it or even had the ability to implement it because I was still living with 3 months at a time, especially October. Somehow October was the flood happened in October. So come up with these little things, witness communities. And that idea, though, of motivation haunted me through my entire Jehovah's Witness career. I don't think it haunts me today, but I try to refine my character. That's what I admire in other people, that type of character, and that's the character I want to have. And I think, perhaps too, and the way I'm interpreting it, the scripture, Jesus is also saying that, and that it is the reasons why we do something. That's the most important. So, let's review the first bit of my life as a testimony of Jehovah's Witness. Fear, guilt, even as a small boy. And it was all about to get worse and worse and worse. So we'll end on that cheery note because it's all going to get better and better and better. Thanks for hearing the first part of my testimony. And I know a lot of witnesses, you'll identify with some of the things. We were definitely harmed by this group. We definitely were harmed by this group. How harmed and how abused we were varies. But I don't think you can spend much time, especially being raised, and not be harmed. And I'm saying that too because when you get out, you're so excited to be out that it could be years. I know it was for me, where I began to focus in on taking care of my mental health and coming to terms being in that cult. I didn't even realize it was a cult the way that I see it now. And it's so obvious that it's a cult. And so my advice always is for folks that get out, if you're wondering what to do, finding your footing, get educated, and take care of your mental health. The mental health may not be an issue right away. You may be just on an adrenaline and on joy of being out of that slavery, mental slavery, the horrors that come with that. But for me, it's something that developed later in life. And a lot of times with childhood trauma, it does come later in life. And if you could save yourself some time, as you're sorting things out, whether Christianity, Bible, whatever your journey is, take the time to take care of yourself. Find out who you are. Find out what you like, what you don't like. Find out what kind of person you are. That might take years. You might make mistakes. I hope you'll find out that you're a great person and someone worthy of love and affection and care. And we have a whole host to talk about on those subjects in the future. And we'll go on to part 2 soon. As we always say here, do not be afraid of them, the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, of what they say. Time's on our side. 1914 was not the invisible presence. And 1919, you were not appointed. Keep well. We'll see you next time on Beyond the Things Written.